There was a bright orange sticker on my windshield that said, "Final warning," even though I'd never gotten a first one. Next thing I know, my truck's gone, towed straight off the street I've parked on for months, in front of my own damn house. And when I called the HOA, they told me it was for aesthetic disruption. Alright, so rewind a bit. I moved into this neighborhood a little over a year ago. Not by choice, exactly. More like by necessity. After the divorce, I needed somewhere stable for me and my daughter, Lily. She's 15, sharp as hell, way too smart for her own good, and way more patient with me than I probably deserve. We do week on, week off custody, and when she's with me, I try to make our time count. You know, cook something half decent, watch old movies, goof around, argue about music, regular stuff, grounding stuff. The house itself was okay. Nothing fancy, just a clean little 3-bed in a neighborhood that looked like it was trying too hard to be a Hallmark movie. Rows of pastel homes, overwatered lawns, the occasional white picket fence with a flag out front. All that. The kicker? It was part of an HOA. But honestly, at the time, I didn't care. I was too busy thinking, can I afford this place and still make Lily's college fund happen someday? The HOA didn't seem like a big deal back then. Brenda, I didn't know her name at the time, showed up the day after closing with a welcome packet full of stuff I didn't read. Smiling too much, but whatever. There was a magnet with a hotline number, a couple flyers about trash day and community rules, and some cookie-cutter language about how the HOA was here to preserve the harmony and beauty of the neighborhood. I stuck it in a drawer and forgot about it. The house didn't have a driveway. I knew that when I bought it, and it didn't bother me. It was one of the few houses on the block without one, but the street was wide, and everybody, parked along the curb anyway. I figured it'd be fine. It had always been fine. Plus, I drive a work truck. It's not some beat-up beater. It's a clean, wrapped F-150 with my company name on the door, Delaney Electrical. It's how I get to job sites, haul gear, pick up Lily's science fair supplies, or her saxophone, or whatever else she forgets at school. It's my livelihood. I park it out front because I don't have another choice. No garage, no alley access, and the HOA parking lot, the one down by the community pool, has been under construction for months. There's a bulldozer sitting out there like a lawn ornament and zero signs of actual work getting done. Nobody's using it, and no one can tell me when it'll reopen. Still, I made it work. I didn't complain. I kept my side of the street clean, didn't throw loud parties, didn't run a circus out of my front yard. Lily and I had our own little rhythm. Some nights we'd sit in the truck with burgers from the place down the road, listen to old Blink-182 and argue about whether it was cringe or classic. It sounds stupid, but those were my favorite nights. Everything was smooth for months. A couple of neighbors waved, a couple nodded, and a few, like old Mrs. Dorsey across the street, just stared like she was cataloging sins for a newsletter, but no one said anything. No warnings, no letters, no knocks on the door. Then out of nowhere, boom, bright orange sticker. Final warning. Like I'd skipped a bunch of steps in a game I didn't know I was playing. At first I thought it was some mix-up. Maybe the city, maybe someone thought I was parking too close to a hydrant or something. But no, it was from the HOA, the same folks who'd welcome me with cookies and that stupid magnet. I looked around and saw other cars on the street. Not one of them had a sticker. Not one, just mine. I peeled the thing off, stuck it on the fridge like a trophy of confusion, and figured I'd sort it out the next day. I wasn't mad yet, just confused, annoyed, sure, but not furious. That came later. When I called the number on the sticker, I got a voicemail. No names, no hours, just a robotic, "Leave your message." So I left one, then I left another one the next day. Nothing. Radio silence. The next time I parked, same spot, right outside my house, I came out and the truck was gone. Just straight up gone. My heart dropped into my stomach. First thought? It got stolen. But no, there was another sticker on the tree near the curb. Vehicle removed by HOA authorization. Like they owned the damn pavement. That's when I felt the first real jolt of what the hell is going on here. Because this wasn't some misunderstanding. This was deliberate, coordinated. Someone had made a decision, targeted me specifically, and followed through. And I was just getting started figuring out how deep it really went. The first real sign that something was off, like off in a way I couldn't ignore anymore, happened maybe a week before that orange sticker showed up. I was out front watering the little strip of grass by the sidewalk. Yeah, I know. I'm not exactly the lawn type, but Lily planted some wildflowers out there last spring, and they'd actually taken. She was proud of that stupid little patch of purple and yellow, and I wasn't about to let it die just because I didn't feel like playing suburban gardener. Anyway, I was out there with the hose when Brenda came walking by. You ever meet someone who smiles at you like she's checking for cracks in your soul? That's Brenda, always smiling, never blinking. She stops on the sidewalk, holding this oversized HOA binder like it's a Bible, and gives me that high-pitched, "Oh, hi there, Sam," like we're best friends who share casserole recipes. I said hey back, friendly enough. I figured she was just doing her rounds, pretending she was on some important mission from the homeowner gods. But then she tilts her head and goes, "Just wanted to give you a heads up. We're working on a new street visibility initiative. It's to keep things safe and tidy while the parking lot's under renovation. You'll probably be getting a little note about it soon." I was like, "Okay, thanks." She gestures vaguely toward my truck, which was parked exactly where it always was, along the curb, right in front of my house, not blocking anything, not on the grass, not double parked. Literally just parked. And then she does this thing where she smiles wider but lowers her voice. You might want to start thinking about alternative arrangements just to be ahead of the curve. That's what she said. Not, "You're violating anything." Not, "We've had complaints." Not even, "Here's a flyer." Just a threat dressed up like a tip, wrapped in a smile so wide it practically creaked. I asked her what kind of arrangements she had in mind, and she just chuckled. "Oh, I'm sure a man like you can figure it out. You're resourceful." That line stuck with me. Not because it was clever, but because it was loaded. Like she already knew something I didn't. Like she'd already decided what the problem was and who was going to pay for it. It was the first moment I realized this wasn't about parking. Not really. It was about me. That night, I told Lily about it while we ate tacos in the truck. She shrugged and said Brenda sounded like one of those teachers who pretend they're nice but hand out detention slips like candy. She wasn't wrong, but I still didn't think it would go further than that. A weird interaction with a weird neighbor, no big deal. I didn't know it yet, but Brenda had just drawn the first line, quietly, politely, with one of those HOA smiles that never quite reach the eyes. After that little conversation with Brenda, things got weird fast. At first, it was small stuff, the kind of things that make you feel like maybe you're just being paranoid. I came home one day and there was a folded piece of paper wedged into my screen door. Not mailed, not in an envelope, just stuck there. It was a friendly reminder from the HOA about maintaining community uniformity. Real vague. It didn't mention my truck or parking or anything specific. Just some nonsense about keeping the curb appeal aligned with neighborhood values. Whatever the hell that meant. I showed it to Terry. He lives 2 doors down, runs a little coffee and donut food truck he parks behind his place. He laughed, then got real quiet. Said he'd gotten a similar note the week before, right after he repainted the trim on his porch a slightly darker shade of blue than whatever was approved. Apparently Brenda came by and told him it wasn't coastal enough. Coastal? We're in the Midwest. So now we're both looking at each other like, is this HOA thing actually turning into something serious? Because we'd both heard stories, online, on Reddit, on those late-night HOA horror podcasts people listen to, but that kind of stuff didn't seem real, not in this neighborhood, not with retirees trimming roses and kids riding scooters and dads grilling burgers in Hawaiian shirts. But here we were. Then the sticker showed up on my windshield. That ridiculous bright orange, final warning. I remember just standing there staring at it, feeling a mix of confusion and insult. I hadn't seen a first warning. I hadn't gotten a notice in the mail. I hadn't gotten anything, unless you count the cryptic fortune cookie Brenda hand-delivered during her little stroll. I called the number on the sticker, left a voicemail, then another. I emailed. Nothing. Complete silence. That night, I parked a block away, just in case. I figured maybe if they saw I was trying to comply, even though I still had no clue what I was actually violating, they'd back off. Lily rolled her eyes when I told her. Said it was like middle school all over again. Petty power trips. But the next time I parked out front, the truck was gone. I stood there for a solid minute thinking maybe I was losing my mind. You ever get that feeling where your body's moving, but your brain hasn't caught up yet? Like your feet are still planted, but your heart's sprinting laps. Then I saw the new sticker. This one zip-tied to the tree in front of the house. Vehicle removed under HOA code violation. Like it was some federal operation. No phone number this time, no warning. Just the badge of a decision that had already been made. I spent half the day calling every tow yard in the county, finally tracked it down and shelled out $280 to get my own damn truck back. The guy at the lot shrugged when I asked who called it in. Said he just gets the request. Didn't know the details. When I got home, I found a second note in my mailbox. Again, no envelope, just folded in half like a passive-aggressive love letter. This one said I'd been assessed a fine for improper vehicle storage. $35. Due in 10 days or it would accrue interest. Interest. On a fine I didn't even know existed until I'd already paid for a tow I never should have gotten in the first place. At that point, I was pissed. I'm not a guy who flies off the handle, but something about the sheer sneakiness of it, the quiet way it was all happening, without explanation or accountability, it just crawled under my skin. I knocked on Terry's door. He didn't answer. Later, I found out he got a violation too, something about his food truck being commercial signage on residential property. Which, sure, maybe, but he's had that thing for years. Nobody cared until now. And just like that, he stopped parking it out back, started keeping it in some rental lot across town, said it wasn't worth the fight. And just like that, they were isolating people, one by one. Then Brenda escalated. I got a letter. Not a folded note this time. A real envelope, official letterhead typed out. Said I was in continued breach of HOA code and that failure to comply may result in legal action or lien placement. It felt like someone had just slid a knife under my front door and told me to smile about it. I tried to talk to her, knocked on her door like a damn idiot. She opened it a crack, just enough to block the view inside, and said, "Sam, this isn't personal. We're just enforcing standards. If you'd like to bring your concerns to the next meeting, the agenda will be posted next month." Next month. I asked her straight up, why me? Why now? What exactly did I do? And she just said, "Some people fit into the fabric of a community. Others pull at the threads." Then she shut the door in my face. That's when I knew. This wasn't about rules. It wasn't about parking or aesthetics or visibility or any of the buzzwords they kept tossing into those notes. It was about making me feel like I didn't belong, and they were just getting started. I didn't want to fight. Not really. I'm not wired like that. I just wanted to fix it, whatever it was, and move on with my life. I've got work, I've got a daughter, I've got bills like everybody else. Getting into some Cold War standoff with a bunch of suburban bureaucrats was not on my bingo card. So I tried to be reasonable. That was my first mistake. I started by writing a letter. You know, one of those real polite, carefully worded things where you're trying not to sound pissed even though every sentence is basically vibrating with held-back sarcasm. I asked for clarification. I asked for documentation. I asked which specific rule I had broken and under what authority they had my truck towed off a public street. I even signed it sincerely, which felt like a damn joke. Dropped it off at the HOA office drop box next to the community center, this little stucco shack with a keypad lock and fake potted plants out front. Waited a week, nothing. So I emailed. Still nothing. I called the number on the original notice again. Finally got someone. A woman named Karen, I kid you not. She said she wasn't authorized to discuss enforcement actions, but that I could submit a request to appear at the next board meeting. I asked when that was. She said the date hadn't been set yet. I asked when it would be set. She said, "Check the bulletin board near the pool." The one that hadn't been updated since Halloween. I started to feel like I was stuck in one of those sitcoms where the main character gets stuck in bureaucratic purgatory and slowly loses his mind. Only this wasn't funny and I wasn't on a soundstage. I even tried to go in person to the city, not even about the HOA stuff, just to find out who actually owned the street. Because here's the thing, I knew I was parking on a public road. Not a private driveway, not a fire lane, not a loading zone. A street, one with regular city signage and trash pickup. I figured maybe I could get someone from zoning or public works to say, "Yeah, HOA doesn't control that, you're good." Instead, I got sent from one desk to another like I was on a bad field trip. Finally, some guy behind a glass partition told me, "If it's a civil matter, we don't intervene. It's between you and your HOA." He gave me a pamphlet about alternative dispute resolution, like I was supposed to sit down over tea with Brenda and talk it out like grown-ups. Spoiler, I tried that too. I ran into her, on purpose, at one of those community meet and greet things. It was in the little grassy park near the playground, the kind of thing where they hand out cookies and lukewarm lemonade and pretend like everything's great. I walked up to her while she was talking to Mrs. Dorsey, the woman who watches everyone from her porch like she's got stock in binoculars. Brenda greeted me with that same Stepford smile. I said I just wanted to clear the air, that maybe there'd been some misunderstanding about my truck, and that I was more than willing to work something out. She didn't say no. She didn't even argue. She just tilted her head and said, "Sam, you've chosen to position yourself against the structure we've built here. That's unfortunate." I stood there for a second, kind of stunned, like I'd walked in expecting a conversation and got a diagnosis instead. I tried to respond. I think I said something about how I wasn't trying to position myself anywhere, I was just trying to live my life without being hassled. But she turned away. Just turned and walked off, mid-sentence, like I didn't even exist. Lily was waiting by the swings when I got back. She asked how it went. I told her Brenda was still Brenda. She said, "You want me to make a TikTok about her?" I laughed, but part of me honestly considered it. Next day, I got another fine. This one for vehicle obstruction of line of sight. No joke, my truck was blocking visual flow of the streetscape. I had no idea what that even meant. I parked it half a block away after that in front of an empty lot. 3 days later, it got towed again. No warning this time, no sticker, just gone. Another $200 out of pocket. Another day of missed work. And when I called to complain, again, Karen told me they'd received reports that I was repeatedly violating rules and creating an unsafe precedent. Unsafe precedent, like I was a criminal mastermind. Like a guy parking in front of his own house was a threat to suburban democracy. I talked to a lawyer after that. Friend of a friend. He looked through the HOA bylaws and said something like, honestly, there's some gray area here. Depends if they can prove it's under their jurisdiction. You could fight it, but it'll take time, and probably money. And time and money were exactly the two things I didn't have lying around. I'd already blown half a paycheck getting my truck back. I couldn't afford to gamble on a court case just to prove I was right. So I tried talking to neighbors. Most of them smiled and nodded and said, yeah, Brenda can be intense, but nobody wanted to get involved. A few looked genuinely nervous. One guy even told me she's not just HOA. Her late husband used to run half the county sheriff's department. She still has friends. So that's where I was. I'd done the polite thing, the patient thing. I'd called, I'd emailed, I'd written letters, I'd asked questions, I'd tried to talk it out. And every time, I was either ignored, dismissed, or punished. I was starting to realize this wasn't a misunderstanding at all. This was a campaign, and they weren't going to stop until I was gone. So here's where it flipped. It had been another long day. Work ran late, traffic sucked, my phone died halfway through a job, and by the time I pulled up to the house, I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. But what really hit me wasn't the exhaustion. It was that feeling, that dread in your stomach, because I didn't see my truck. Again, gone. No sticker, no warning, nothing. Just an empty curb and that same hollow pit in my gut that kept getting deeper every time this happened. This was the third tow. Third. And this time, I'd parked practically on top of the damn fire hydrant just to make sure it was on public street space and not even remotely touching any grass, property line, or made-up HOA zone. I double-checked the city's GIS map the week before. I'd printed the damn thing. I knew that spot was city property. So now I'm mad. Like burn it down kinda mad. I didn't even call the tow yard right away. I just walked inside, opened up my laptop, and went full conspiracy theory mode. I started digging into the HOA bylaws again. I'd read through them before, but this time I wasn't just looking for rules. I was looking for holes. And here's the twist. And I swear to God, it felt like hitting a hidden switch behind a bookcase. While I was flipping through the digital files, which are ancient scanned PDFs that look like they were typed on a fax machine from 1983, I noticed something weird. The street I live on? According to the document labeled Annex 2 Map of Governing Jurisdiction, my block wasn't actually colored in. It just wasn't there. The HOA boundaries literally stopped at the end of the next street over. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake, like they forgot to shade it in, so I kept looking. I found an amendment, some bland-sounding document labeled Phase 3 Inclusion Plan, that talked about expanding the HOA's coverage to include the newer homes on my street. It listed the lot numbers and everything. Only one problem. That amendment was never finalized. I mean, it was written up, it had a draft date, but there were no signatures, no county seal, no official filing number. It even had a footer that said draft, not for recording. I sat back in my chair and just stared at the screen, because if that document never got filed, if that expansion was never made official, then Brenda's been enforcing HOA authority on a street that doesn't legally belong to them. Not in their charter, not in their jurisdiction. I pulled up the county assessor's parcel records just to be sure, typed in my address, and right there, in plain black text, no active HOA. My house wasn't part of the HOA, never had been. I was sitting there, in this crappy office chair that creaks if you lean too far left, staring at my screen like I'd just been slapped in the face by a ghost. All that stress, all those tows, all those fines, and I never even belonged to them in the first place. They had no legal right to touch my truck, or fine me, or harass me. The whole thing was a bluff. And Brenda? Brenda knew. I knew she knew. Because there was no way a woman who walked around quoting bylaws from memory hadn't noticed a missing signature on an amendment that never passed. She was banking on the fact that no one would dig. No one would question. that I'd just roll over and comply like everybody else. But she picked the wrong guy, and suddenly, for the first time in months, I didn't feel tired. I didn't feel helpless. I felt something I hadn't felt since all this started. Control. Like maybe I wasn't losing my mind. Like maybe they should have picked a different street. After I found that clause, or lack of clause, really, I just sat there for a while, trying to wrap my head around it. Like I kept rereading the document, zooming in, scrolling up and down, thinking maybe I was missing something. But no, it was real. My street had never been officially added to the HOA. All this time, I'd been treated like I was under their boot, and technically, I wasn't even in their damn yard. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was anxious, not anymore, but because my brain was moving a mile a minute like it had been set on fire. Everything started clicking into place. The letters, the TOWs, the bogus violations, the little smirks Brenda gave me like she already knew how the game would end. But she didn't know this. And now I had a crack in the wall. A real one. So I started putting together a plan. I'm not a lawyer, I don't play one on TV, but I do know how to keep my head on straight when things get messy. That's the job, really. Being an electrician means troubleshooting, reading schematics, figuring out how systems fail and how to fix them without getting electrocuted. This wasn't so different. Just a different kind of wiring. First thing I did was start gathering proof. Not emotions, not rants, actual paper, screenshots, PDFs. Parcel. Records from the county website, the old HOA maps, the draft amendment that never got filed. I even printed my property tax statement, just to show I wasn't paying dues to them and never had. I needed to be airtight. If I was going to do this, I wasn't giving Brenda a single inch of wiggle room. Then I thought about who I could trust. That list was short. Terry was the first call. He'd been burned by them too. Not as bad, but enough to know I wasn't just some conspiracy nut with a vendetta. I met him outside his house the next morning, showed him everything. He just stared at the papers for a while, then let out this long breath and said, "Man, she's gonna hate this." That was all I needed to hear. Terry offered to reach out to a buddy of his who used to work code enforcement for the city. Not a big shot, just a guy who knew how to read filings and knew who to call when something didn't add up. I gave him copies of what I had, and within a couple days, his buddy confirmed it. The HOA had never submitted the paperwork to legally expand their boundary. It wasn't just a missed step, it was a ghost clause, a legal nothing. So now I had two things, proof and a second voice to back me up. But I needed more. I remembered someone else, Alyssa, newer neighbor, moved in a few months ago. We'd only talked once or twice, small talk about trash pickup, weather, whatever. But I remembered her mentioning offhand that she used to work in administrative law, government stuff. I figured it was worth a shot. I walked over and laid it all out. To her credit, she didn't look surprised. She just listened, nodded, asked the right questions. When I finished, she said, "This is textbook overreach. If you're not technically part of the HOA, they're in violation of state code every time they act like you are." Then she asked if I'd ever considered filing with the Attorney General's office. I hadn't. Honestly, I didn't even think that was an option for someone like me, just a guy trying to keep his truck from getting kidnapped every other week. But she told me that in our state, if an HOA is operating outside its legal boundary and enforcing non-existent governance, the AG can initiate an investigation, especially if there's a pattern of financial or legal abuse. And I had a pattern. We decided to write it all up. Not just a complaint, but a report. Detailed. Professional. Alyssa helped with the legal language, Terry provided a timeline of events from his side, and I attached every damn receipt, notice, letter, and photo I'd collected over the past 6 months. Lily even helped. She organized the folder tabs and insisted on color-coding them like we were going to war with crayons and spreadsheets. I didn't send it in right away, though. I wanted to be ready for the fallout. Because I knew Brenda. She wasn't the type to go down easy. She wasn't going to roll over just because someone showed her a map with the wrong street color. I had a gut feeling this was going to get messy before it got clean. So I planned for that, too. I made digital copies, saved backups in 3 places, gave Alyssa a full set, stashed another one with Terry. I wanted this thing to survive, even if they came for my mailbox next. And then I waited. It wasn't revenge. Not really. I didn't want to burn it all down. I just wanted the damn truth to matter for once. I wanted my truck back where it belonged. I wanted my daughter to see that sometimes, when people push you, you don't have to run. Sometimes you stand your ground. Sometimes you push back. So yeah, I was ready. I'd done the work, built the file, lined up my allies, not many, but enough, and mailed off the complaint to the Attorney General's office, certified, tracked, and I made damn sure Brenda wouldn't be the first to find out. I wanted her to feel it after it was already moving. The first real move I made, though, the first public one, was at the HOA meeting. See, by that point, they'd finally posted a meeting date, probably to give off the illusion they were being transparent. It was taped to the community center bulletin board, printed in that same Times New Roman font they use for everything, like legalese has to look like it came from 1998. I showed up early. Not to kiss up, just to watch. Brenda was already there, sitting at the fold-out table in the front with her little nameplate and a stack of papers like she was presiding over a corporate merger instead of a suburban grievance circle. About a dozen people showed up. Most of them looked bored, like they were just there to complain about tree trimming or dog poop. A couple gave me side eyes. I caught one whispering to Mrs. Dorsey, who was glaring at me like I'd pissed on her begonias. When the floor opened for comments, I raised my hand and walked up. I didn't yell. I didn't even bring the big binder. Just a few sheets, printed clean and neat, and my parcel record with the assessor's stamp. I held it up and said, real calm. My name is Sam Delaney. I live on Winslow Court. According to this document and several others which I've submitted to the Attorney General's office, my property has never been legally annexed into this HOA. The room got real quiet. Brenda's face didn't move. She just blinked, slow, like she was waiting for a punchline. I kept going. I've had my vehicle towed multiple times. I've been fined, harassed, and targeted by enforcement actions that have no legal foundation, and I can prove it. I can prove the amendment to expand this HOA to include my street was drafted, but never filed, never ratified, and never entered into county records. Brenda finally spoke. She said, "That's not accurate, Mr. Delaney. You're misinterpreting the documents." So I handed her a copy, just slid it across the table. "This is from the county's own records," I said. "I called, I verified, and I filed a formal complaint." She looked at the paper, but not really. More like she was staring through it, like if she didn't acknowledge it, it wouldn't count. Then she looked up at the room and gave this tight smile like a politician caught with their mic still on. "We'll take your concerns under advisement," she said. That was it. No denial, no outrage, just corporate deflection. But her eyes were different. I could see it. That flicker, that brief, sharp flick of "oh no." By the time I walked back to my seat, a few of the others were actually whispering to each other, like they'd just realized maybe this wasn't about parking after all. Maybe there was something wrong here. That was the beginning of the shift. After that, it got uglier. Which I expected. Brenda wasn't going down without claws. 2 days later, I got another violation notice in the mail. This one said I was willfully disrupting community cohesion. Not even a real thing. No code, no fine. Just a scolding, written like she was my principal and I'd skipped detention. Then Terry got one too. Something about unauthorized signage. He had a small magnet on his mailbox that said "Support local business." Apparently that was a threat now. Alyssa, bless her, got called a disruptive influence in an internal HOA email that someone anonymously forwarded to her. The tone was wild, like she was leading a rebellion with torches and pitchforks. We laughed about it, then added it to the growing file. I kept records of everything. And then the call came. It wasn't Brenda, it was from the AG's office. A real investigator. Polite, professional, but with the kind of voice that says, "I don't like being lied to." He told me they'd reviewed the documents, verified the missing annexation, and were initiating a preliminary inquiry into the HOA's activities. He couldn't promise anything yet. Investigations take time, but he thanked me. Said the evidence was substantial, and that was all I needed. I didn't even realize I was gripping the phone so tight until I hung up and my fingers hurt. The next HOA newsletter, the one they stuff into everyone's door slot, was weirdly short. No president's message, no Brenda blurb about how to plant your begonias or store your trash cans. Just a calendar, a list of pool hours, and a tiny line at the bottom that said, "Please be advised that Winslow Court is not currently under HOA governance pending review." That was it, but it was enough. Word spread fast after that. People started asking questions. Brenda stopped returning calls. Mrs. Dorsey started closing her blinds when I walked by. One neighbor who hadn't spoken to me in 6 months actually came over with banana bread and asked if I could explain what "not part of the HOA" meant for property taxes. I didn't celebrate, not yet, because this wasn't over. But I'd landed the first real hit. Not a jab, not a swing, an actual hit. And now, for the first time, Brenda was the one on her heels. It started with a knock, not the dramatic, thunderous kind, just 3 sharp taps on my door. I opened it, expecting a package or maybe Terry stopping by, but it was some guy in slacks and a windbreaker with a badge around his neck and a clipboard under his arm. Looked like someone who spent his days digging through filing cabinets and his nights wondering how to burn them down. He introduced himself, investigator from the AG's office, real calm, real matter-of-fact. Said he was following up on the complaint I filed and would I be willing to answer some questions? Would I? I practically dragged him in and offered him coffee. He sat at my kitchen table with the patience of someone who'd been through this kind of mess before, asked questions, real specific ones, timelines, copies of letters, the exact tow yard where my truck had been taken. I had everything. Hell, I had color-coded folders thanks to Lily and a USB drive with backups just in case someone decided to accidentally shred something. He took notes, nodded a lot, didn't give much away, but I could tell when something hit. His pen would pause, or he'd reread something twice. At one point he asked, "You're telling me they issued fines, towed property, and sent written threats, all while having no governing jurisdiction over your street?" I said, "That's exactly what I'm telling you." He shook his head just once, slow and deliberate, wrote something, then said, "You're not the only one we're talking to." That was the moment, because it meant I wasn't just screaming into the void anymore. Other people had come forward. Other people had had enough. It got loud after that. A week later, a local reporter showed up outside the HOA office with a camera crew. The headline ran that night, "HOA enforces illegal fines on non-member residents. State launches investigation." There was a shot of Brenda walking briskly from her car, holding a binder over her face like the HOA bylaws could protect her from public opinion. Terry sent me the link in all caps. I watched it 3 times just to let it soak in. And then the emails started. Not just from the AG's office, from neighbors, people I hadn't spoken to, people who used to keep their eyes down and mouths shut. They started sending me their own stories, their own finds, their own proof. Brenda had gone after a lot of folks, not just me, but nobody thought they could fight back. They didn't have the energy or the time or the stomach for a war. Until now. Next HOA meeting was standing room only. I walked in late on purpose, and the place was buzzing. Like a fuse had been lit, and everyone was waiting to see what would catch. Brenda wasn't at her usual seat. In her place was Mark, some guy from the board I'd never heard speak before, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He cleared his throat and announced that Brenda had voluntarily stepped down as president pending the results of the ongoing inquiry. Voluntarily, sure. Then someone else stood up, Alyssa, bless her, and made a motion to suspend all enforcement actions on Winslow Court and any adjacent properties until the legal boundaries could be reestablished. No one objected, not one damn person. They just nodded, voted, and wrote it down. There it was, on record. No more fines, no more towels, no more passive-aggressive notices on my windshield. That night, I parked my truck in front of my house, dead center of the curb, bold as hell, and just stood there, watched the streetlights flicker on, heard the bugs buzzing, smelled someone's barbecue down the block, probably celebrating their own tiny victory, and I swear I could feel it in the air. That shift, like the whole neighborhood had exhaled. Lily came outside, barefoot, hoodie over her pajama shirt, and leaned against the truck next to me. She didn't say anything for a minute, just stood there, arms crossed. Then she said, "So what happens now?" And I said, "Now they get to explain themselves." Because the AG wasn't done. A few weeks later, there was a formal notice from the state. The HOA was found to be operating beyond the limits of its charter, which is lawyer speak for they went rogue. They'd been enforcing rules, collecting fines, and manipulating documents for years, including trying to quietly rezone part of the neighborhood without a vote. They were fined. Heavily, and several residents, including Terry, got their money refunded. Others had their violations wiped clean. I got a letter, official letter, apologizing for the inconvenience and stating that my property had never been under their governance. Brenda disappeared, moved out, I think, or maybe just vanished behind those perfectly trimmed hedges and never came back. Either way, no one's seen her since. The HOA still exists, barely, but now they meet in a smaller room with fewer rules and a whole lot more humility. And me? I'm still here, same house, same truck, same wildflower patch out front. Only now, the curb is just a curb, not a battlefield, and I didn't go anywhere.